The fluorescent bulb in the basement flickered with a rhythm that had become as familiar to Rebecca Morrison as her own heartbeat. 3 quick pulses, a longer darkness, then a weak glow that barely pushed back the shadows. She'd counted those flickers for what felt like hours, maybe days. Time lost meaning when you were locked in a concrete box that smelled of mildew and old paint cans. Her wrists ached where the zip ties had cut into her skin before she'd finally worked them loose against the rough edge of a metal shelf. Small victory. Meaningless victory. Because even with her hands free, the basement door remained locked from the outside, and the single window near the ceiling had been boarded up months ago when David had decided she needed correction for talking to the mailman. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Rebecca pressed her ear against the cold basement door, listening for sounds from upstairs. Footsteps. The television. Anything that might tell her where David was, what mood he was in, whether today would be the day he finally went too far. She'd stopped believing in rescue months ago. The neighbors heard her scream and turned up their televisions. The grocery store clerk saw her bruises and looked away. Her sister had stopped returning her calls after David convinced her that Rebecca was mentally unstable, making up stories for attention. In David's world, Rebecca Morrison didn't exist as a person. She was a possession that occasionally malfunctioned and needed to be stored away until she remembered her place. The sound of small feet on the stairs above made Rebecca's heart clench. Sophie, her 7-year-old daughter, who shouldn't be home from school yet. But it was Tuesday, early dismissal day. Rebecca had lost track of the days down here in the dark. "Mama?" Sophie's voice was barely a whisper, filtered through the thick basement door. Small fingers scraped against the wood. "Mama, are you still down there?" "I'm here, baby," Rebecca called back, trying to keep her voice steady, normal, as if being locked in a basement was just another Tuesday afternoon. "Are you okay? Did you have a good day at school?" "I got an A on my spelling test," Sophie said, and Rebecca could hear the tears in her daughter's voice. "I wanted to show you, but Daddy said you were sick again. He said you need to stay in the dark until you feel better." Rebecca closed her eyes, fighting back her own tears. This was what David did. He normalized the horror, taught their daughter that locking Mommy in the basement was medicine, not abuse, that the bruises were because Mommy was clumsy, that the screaming was because Mommy was dramatic. "That's wonderful about your test, Sophie. I'm so proud of you." Rebecca pressed her palm flat against the door, imagining she could feel her daughter's warmth through the wood. "Sweetheart, I need you to do something for me. I need you to go to your room and stay there until Daddy comes home, okay? Don't make any noise. Don't draw attention. Just be very, very quiet." "But I'm hungry," Sophie whispered. "And I'm scared. He forgot to leave me lunch money again, and I didn't eat today." Rage and helplessness warred in Rebecca's chest. Her baby was hungry. Her baby was scared. And she was trapped in a basement, unable to do the one thing mothers were supposed to do: protect their children. "Check the cookie jar on top of the refrigerator," Rebecca said quietly. "There's emergency money hidden in the false bottom. Make yourself a sandwich, but clean up everything perfectly. No crumbs, no mess. Nothing that will make him angry. Can you do that?" "Yes, Mama." Sophie's voice was so small, so frightened, so heartbreakingly obedient. "Mama, when will you get better? When can you come out?" "Soon, baby. Very soon," Rebecca lied, because what else could she do? Tell her 7-year-old daughter that they were trapped in a nightmare with no escape? That the man who should protect them was the monster they needed protection from? Sophie's footsteps retreated up the stairs, and Rebecca slid down the door to sit on the cold concrete floor. She'd been down here for 2 days this time. 2 days because she'd questioned David's decision to quit his job again, to blow through their savings again, to day drink again. 2 days without food, with only the utility sink in the corner for water. 2 days of listening to her daughter walk above her head, knowing Sophie was alone with a man whose moods shifted like weather, violent and unpredictable. This was Rebecca's life at 29 years old. a college degree in elementary education that she'd never been allowed to use, a marriage that had turned from romance to prison within 6 months, a daughter who was learning that love meant fear and control and basement doors that locked from the outside. She pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around herself for warmth. The basement was cold in October, and David had taken her cardigan before locking her down here. Another small cruelty in a marriage built on them. Rebecca had tried leaving once, 18 months ago. She'd packed bags while David was at the bar, taken Sophie to her sister's house 3 states away. They'd lasted 4 days before David showed up, sober and apologetic, with flowers and tears and promises that he'd changed. Her sister had believed him. Everyone always believed him. David Morrison was charming, successful when he wanted to be, the kind of man who coached Little League and volunteered at church fundraisers. Nobody saw the monster who emerged behind closed doors. When Rebecca refused to come home, David had played his trump card. He'd filed for emergency custody, claiming Rebecca had kidnapped Sophie during a mental health crisis. He had a lawyer. He had documentation of her instability doctor's visits. He'd forced her to attend. Prescriptions for anxiety medication he'd convinced her she needed. He had a judge who saw a concerned father and a hysterical mother. Rebecca had lost. She always lost. So she'd come back, and David had made sure she understood the consequences of trying to leave again. The first night back, he'd introduced her to the basement, to the lock on the door, to the understanding that if she ever tried to take Sophie again, if she ever went to the police, if she ever told anyone what really happened in their house, she would disappear. And Sophie would be raised by him, alone, with no one to protect her from his rages. It was the most effective prison Rebecca had ever encountered. Not chains or bars, but love. The desperate, consuming love of a mother who would endure anything to keep her daughter safe. Dante Caruso stood in the rain outside the Morrison house, his expensive wool coat darkening with moisture as he studied the modest 2-story colonial. It looked like every other house on this suburban New Jersey street. Well-maintained lawn, American flag on the porch, basketball hoop above the garage, the picture of middle-class normalcy. But Dante hadn't survived 20 years in his business by trusting appearances. His presence here was unusual. Dante Caruso didn't typically handle collections personally. He had soldiers for that, young men eager to prove themselves by intimidating deadbeats who borrowed money they couldn't repay. But David Morrison was different. David Morrison had borrowed $50,000 from one of Dante's legitimate lending operations 6 months ago, used it to start a consulting business that immediately failed, and then had the audacity to disappear without making a single payment. Dante's accountant had flagged the loan 3 weeks ago. His investigator had tracked Morrison to this address 2 days ago. And something about the situation had nagged at Dante enough that he'd decided to handle it himself. Maybe it was the investigator's notes about a wife and daughter. Dante had rules about families. Or maybe it was just instinct, the 6th sense that had kept him alive and free while so many of his competitors ended up dead or imprisoned. He approached the front door, his bodyguard Marco staying by the car as instructed. This wasn't a shakedown. This was a conversation. Dante had found that conversations often yielded better results than violence, especially in neighborhoods where gunshots attracted police attention. He knocked. 3 firm raps that echoed in the quiet afternoon. No answer. He knocked again, harder this time. "Go away," a man's voice shouted from inside. "We're not buying anything." "Mr. Morrison," Dante called through the door, his voice carrying the authority of someone who expected to be obeyed. "I'm here about your loan. We need to talk." Silence. Then, footsteps, approaching quickly. The door jerked open, revealing a man in his mid-30s with thinning hair and the red-rimmed eyes of someone who'd been drinking. David Morrison wore sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, and he reeked of whiskey and stale cigarettes. "I don't know what you're talking about," Morrison said, but his eyes betrayed his fear. He knew exactly who Dante was. The investigator's report had included that detail. Morrison had done his research before borrowing, had known he was dealing with the Caruso family, and had borrowed anyway. $50,000. Dante said calmly. 6 months ago. 0 payments made. I'm a patient man, Mr. Morrison, but my patience has limits. I need to know when you plan to start repaying what you owe. Morrison's face flushed with anger, the fear quickly buried beneath bravado. You can't come to my house. This is harassment. I'll call the cops. Please do, Dante replied, his voice still pleasant. I'd be happy to explain to them about our legitimate business loan, properly documented and legally binding. I'm sure they'd be very interested in your failure to repay. Morrison's jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists at his sides, and Dante recognized the posture of a man who used his fists often. He'd seen it countless times before, the particular kind of coward who felt powerful hitting people who couldn't hit back. I don't have the money, Morrison said flatly. Business failed. I'm broke. You're not getting anything from me. Then we have a problem, Dante said. Because debts don't disappear just because they're inconvenient. We need to discuss a payment plan. That's when Dante heard it. A small voice, barely audible, coming from somewhere inside the house. He locks her in the basement. Dante's attention sharpened instantly. The voice belonged to a child, young, frightened. He looked past Morrison, seeing a little girl standing at the top of the staircase inside the house. She was maybe 7 or 8, with dark hair and eyes that were far too old for her face. She wore a school uniform that was slightly too small, and she held a stuffed rabbit against her chest like a shield. Sophie, go to your room, Morrison barked, his face going from red to purple. Right now. But Sophie didn't move. She stared at Dante with an intensity that made his chest tighten. He locks my mama in the basement, she repeated, louder this time. She's down there right now. She's been down there for 2 days. She doesn't have food. She's cold. Morrison whirled toward his daughter, fury radiating from every line of his body. You little... He started toward the stairs, and Dante saw murder in his eyes. Not literal murder, perhaps, but the kind of rage that put children in hospitals. Dante moved. He was inside the house in 3 strides, his hand gripping Morrison's shoulder and spinning him around before the man could reach the staircase. Don't, Dante said quietly, his voice dropping to the register that made men remember they were mortal. Don't even think about touching that child. Morrison tried to jerk away, tried to throw a punch that Dante caught easily, twisting the man's arm behind his back and forcing him to his knees with minimal effort. Dante had learned to fight in the streets of Brooklyn before most people learned to drive. Subduing a drunk suburban bully required almost no effort at all. Sophie, Dante said, keeping his voice gentle while maintaining his grip on her father. Where's the basement door? Sophie pointed to a door off the kitchen, her small hand shaking. He has the key in his pocket, the left one. Dante reached into Morrison's pocket, finding a single key on a plain metal ring. He looked at Sophie again, this voice absolutely serious. I'm going to let your father go. I need you to go outside to the black car in front of your house. There's a man named Marco waiting there. Tell him Dante sent you. He'll keep you safe while I check on your mother. Can you do that? Sophie nodded, clutching her rabbit tighter. She moved past them, giving her father a wide berth, and Dante felt rage simmer in his gut. No child should have to navigate around their own parent with that kind of fear. You're making a mistake, Morrison hissed as Dante released him. You have no idea what you're walking into. That bitch is crazy. She makes up stories. She's dangerous. Dante had heard it all before. Every abuser had the same script. She's crazy. She provoked me. She's lying. The words were as predictable as they were hollow. He walked to the basement door, key in hand, and Morrison scrambled to his feet behind him. You can't go down there. This is my house. You're trespassing. I'll call the police. Call them? Dante said, unlocking the door. I'm sure they'll be very interested in what I find down here. The basement stairs descended into darkness. Dante found a light switch, and the fluorescent bulb flickered to life, revealing concrete walls and a space that smelled of damp and desperation. At the bottom of the stairs, pressed against the far wall, sat a woman. She was younger than Dante expected, late 20s perhaps, with long dark hair that hung in tangles around her face. Her clothes were wrinkled and dirty. Her wrists bore the red marks of restraints. Her face was bruised, old injuries layered over new ones in a map of sustained abuse. But it was her eyes that stopped Dante in his tracks. They were filled with defiance even as she curled into herself, expecting more violence, more pain, but refusing to show fear. "Who are you?" Rebecca asked, her voice hoarse from lack of water. "Did David send you to scare me?" "Congratulate him. I'm terrified." "My name is Dante Caruso," he said, descending the stairs slowly, keeping his hands visible. "Your daughter told me you were down here. I'm going to get you out." Rebecca laughed, the sound bitter and broken. "Right. And then what? He calls the police. He tells them I'm mentally unstable. He gets full custody of Sophie. I disappear entirely." She shook her head. "I know how this ends. I lived it before. Just leave, please." "You're only making things worse." Dante studied her for a long moment, seeing the intelligence behind the defeat, the strength that had somehow survived years of systematic destruction. "When's the last time you ate?" "What does it matter?" "It matters because I'm going to take you upstairs, and I'm going to make sure you and your daughter are somewhere safe. And then I'm going to have a very serious conversation with your husband about what happens to men who lock their wives in basements." "You can't," Rebecca said, but there was hope creeping into her voice now, tentative and terrifying. "You don't understand what he's capable of." "Actually," Dante said, "I don't think you understand what I'm capable of. Now, can you walk, or do you need help?" Rebecca pushed herself to her feet, swaying slightly. Dante moved to steady her, and she flinched back instinctively. He froze, keeping his distance, letting her see that he wasn't a threat. "I can walk," she said finally. "But Sophie is already outside with my associate. She's safe. I promised her I'd check on you." Something in Rebecca's expression cracked at that. The knowledge that her daughter had spoken up, had asked for help, had found someone who listened. Tears streamed down her face, and she wiped them away angrily with the back of her hand. "Sophie's smart," Rebecca whispered. "Too smart. She knows things no 7-year-old should know about hiding and staying quiet and keeping secrets. Then it's time for those secrets to end," Dante said simply. He led Rebecca up the stairs, his hand hovering near her elbow but not touching, ready to catch her if she fell but respecting her space. David Morrison stood in the kitchen, and when he saw Rebecca emerge from the basement, his face went white with panic that quickly shifted to rage. "Rebecca," he said, his voice taking on a tone Dante recognized instantly. The patient, reasonable voice of a predator playing at civilization. "There you are. I was just explaining to Mr. Caruso that you've been sick, that you needed rest, that I've been taking such good care of you. He locked me in the basement," Rebecca said, her voice stronger now. "For 2 days. Without food, because I questioned his drinking." "She's confused," Morrison said quickly, addressing Dante now. "The medication makes her delusional. I was just keeping her safe from herself until the episode passed. You have to understand, she's not well." Dante looked at Rebecca's bruised face, at her zip-tie marked wrists, at the defeat and rage warring in her expression. Then he looked at David Morrison, seeing the calculated manipulation, the practiced lies. "Mr. Morrison," Dante said quietly, "I'm going to need you to sit down. We have a lot to discuss about your debt and about your future." "I don't have to do anything," Morrison spat. "This is my house. That's my wife. That's my daughter. And you're trespassing. Get the hell out before I call the cops." Dante pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed a number. It was answered on the first ring. "Gianni? I'm going to need you to make some calls. David Morrison, 47 Maple Avenue. See what documentation we can find about loan defaults, check fraud, anything that might interest law enforcement." He paused, listening. "No, this is personal now. And send the car. I have passengers who need secure transport." He ended the call and turned back to Morrison, whose face had gone from purple to pale. "Here's how this is going to work. You're going to sit down at that kitchen table and not move while I make sure your wife and daughter get somewhere safe. Then you and I are going to have a conversation about payment plans and about what happens to men who hurt women and children. If you resist, if you threaten, if you even raise your voice, I will have you arrested for loan fraud before sunset. Do we understand each other?" Morrison sat, because men like him always folded when confronted with real consequences. Dante turned to Rebecca, his voice gentle. "Is there anything you need from upstairs? Clothes, documents, anything important?" Rebecca nodded slowly, still processing that this was happening, that someone was actually helping. "Sophie's room, second door on the right. There's a bag already packed in her closet. I've kept one ready since." She trailed off. "And my purse? It's in the bedroom. My ID, Sophie's birth certificate, everything important is inside." "I'll get them," Dante said. He looked at Morrison. "You stay exactly where you are." He climbed the stairs, finding Sophie's room exactly where Rebecca described. The bag was there, tucked behind some boxes. It broke his heart to see it, this evidence of a woman so trapped she'd packed emergency supplies for an escape she didn't believe would ever come. In the master bedroom, he found Rebecca's purse and noticed immediately the spare bedroom across the hall. The door had a lock on the outside. Another prison, he realized. Multiple rooms in this house designed to contain, to control, to break someone's spirit. When he returned downstairs, Rebecca was sitting at the kitchen table across from her husband, maintaining as much distance as possible. She looked up as Dante set the bags by the door, gratitude and disbelief mixing in her expression. "A car is coming," Dante said. "It'll take you and Sophie somewhere safe. My people will make sure you have everything you need." "I can't pay you back," Rebecca said quietly. "Whatever this costs, whatever you're expecting in return, I don't have it." "I'm not asking for payment," Dante replied. "I'm correcting a situation that never should have existed." The black car arrived within 10 minutes, driven by Gianni, Dante's most trusted associate. Rebecca let Dante guide her outside, where Sophie waited with Marco. The little girl ran to her mother, and Rebecca dropped to her knees, pulling Sophie into her arms and sobbing. "I'm sorry, baby," Rebecca whispered. "I'm so sorry you had to be brave like that. You should never have had to be that brave." "It's okay, Mama," Sophie said, patting her mother's hair with small, careful hands. "Mr. Dante came. He helped us. Just like I knew someone would if I asked." Dante watched them, these two survivors clinging to each other in the rain, and felt something shift in his chest. He'd spent 20 years building an empire, accumulating power and wealth and respect. But standing on this suburban street, watching a mother and daughter embrace after years of torture, he realized that power meant nothing if it couldn't protect moments like this. Rebecca looked up at him, rain mixing with her tears. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know us." "Your daughter asked for help," Dante said simply. "And I've spent too many years ignoring people who needed it." "Not anymore." He returned inside, where David Morrison still sat at the kitchen table, looking smaller now, diminished. Without his victims to control, he was revealed as what he truly was, a pathetic, violent coward. "Here's what's going to happen," Dante said, his voice cold enough to make Morrison shiver. "You're going to sign divorce papers that my lawyer will prepare. You're going to relinquish all custody rights to Sophie. You're going to transfer the title of this house to Rebecca. And you're going to leave the state of New Jersey and never contact them again." "You can't make me," Morrison started. "I can," Dante interrupted. "Because the alternative is that my investigator gives law enforcement everything he's found. The loan fraud, the identity theft, the check kiting. You've been running cons for years, Morrison. Small ones, petty ones, but enough to put you away for a decade. So you have a choice. Sign the papers and disappear, or go to prison. What's it going to be?" Morrison's face twisted with impotent rage. You think you've won? You think you can just swoop in and play hero? Rebecca is mine. That house is mine. Sophie is mine. You can't take what's mine. Dante leaned forward, placing both hands flat on the table, his face inches from Morrison's. They were never yours. You don't own people, Morrison. You never did. And if you ever come near them again, if you so much as send a text message, I will make you disappear. Not metaphorically, not legally. I will literally make you vanish, and nobody will ever find what's left. Are we absolutely clear? The threat hung in the air, and Morrison finally understood what he was dealing with. Not a businessman, not a loan officer, but something far more dangerous. He nodded, the fight going out of him. Good, Dante said, straightening. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow. You have 72 hours to sign everything and vacate. If you're still in New Jersey after that, our agreement is void. He walked out without looking back, leaving Morrison alone in his house of horrors with the understanding that his reign of terror had finally ended. Outside, Gianni was loading bags into the car, while Rebecca and Sophie sat in the back seat. Sophie was already dozing against her mother's shoulder, exhausted by fear and relief. Rebecca watched Dante approach, her expression complicated. Where are you taking us? She asked. Somewhere safe, Dante replied. I own a property in Montclair. Fully furnished, secure building with a doorman. You and Sophie can stay there as long as you need while you figure out your next steps. And then what? When you get tired of being the hero? When whatever debt you think I owe comes due. Dante understood her suspicion. She'd learned not to trust anyone, especially men offering help. Then, nothing. You owe me nothing, Rebecca. This isn't about debt. This is about... He paused, searching for words. Your daughter whispered for help loud enough for me to hear. I can't unhear it. And I can't walk away from it. That's all this is. Rebecca studied his face, looking for deception, for hidden motives. Finally, she nodded. Okay, but I need you to understand something. I'm not broken. I'm not helpless. I just need time and space, and a chance to rebuild. I don't need saving. I need an opportunity. Then that's what I'll give you, Dante said. An opportunity. As the car pulled away, Dante stood in the rain, watching until it disappeared around the corner. Marco appeared at his elbow, clearing his throat. Boss, that was unusual. We don't typically get involved in domestic situations. We do now, Dante replied. Or at least I do. He thought about Sophie's words echoing in his memory. He locks her in the basement. 7 words that had changed everything. 7 words that had shown him a different way to use his power. Dante Caruso had spent 20 years building an empire of fear. Maybe it was time to build something else, something better. Starting with a woman and her daughter who'd survived hell and deserved heaven. The apartment in Montclair was nothing like Rebecca had expected. She'd imagined something cold and impersonal, a corporate rental with bland furniture and white walls. Instead, Gianni had driven them to a historic brownstone building in a tree-lined neighborhood where children played on sidewalks and couples walked dogs in the evening light. The apartment itself occupied the entire 3rd floor. Hardwood floors gleamed under soft lighting. The living room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a small park. The furniture was comfortable, lived in, with throw blankets and actual books on the shelves. The kitchen had granite counters and stainless steel appliances that looked almost too nice to use. There were 2 bedrooms, each with their own bathroom, and the larger one had been prepared with fresh linens and flowers on the nightstand. Mr. Caruso had us stock the refrigerator and pantry, Gianni explained as Sophie explored the apartment with wide-eyed wonder. If you need anything else, just call this number. He handed Rebecca a card with a phone number written in neat script. Someone will be available 24 hours a day. Rebecca took the card with trembling fingers. 2 hours ago, she'd been locked in a basement. Now she stood in an apartment that probably cost more per month than she'd earned in a year before David had forbidden her to work. The whiplash was disorienting. Thank you, she managed, her voice rough from disuse and emotion. Gianni nodded and moved toward the door, pausing before he left. Mr. Caruso wanted me to tell you that there's a security detail in the building. Discreet, but present. Mr. Morrison won't be able to get anywhere near you or Sophie. You're safe here. After he left, Rebecca stood in the center of the living room, trying to process everything that had happened. Sophie appeared from one of the bedrooms, her stuffed rabbit still clutched against her chest. Mama, Sophie said, her voice small and uncertain. Is this real? Or are we going to wake up back there? Rebecca knelt down and pulled her daughter into her arms, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her small body. This is real, baby. We're really here. We're really safe. Sophie started crying then, the kind of deep, racking sobs that came from a child who'd been holding everything inside for far too long. Rebecca held her, rocking her gently, letting her cry out months of fear and stress, and the burden of secrets no 7-year-old should have to carry. You were so brave, Rebecca whispered. So brave. You saved us, Sophie. You knew to ask for help, and you did it even though you were scared. I didn't know if he would help, Sophie hiccuped between sobs. I just knew Daddy was going to hurt you again, and I couldn't stop him. I'm too little to stop him. You're not too little, Rebecca said fiercely. You did exactly what you needed to do. You found someone who could help. That takes more courage than you know. They stayed like that for a long time, mother and daughter holding each other in this strange new sanctuary, both afraid to believe it was real but desperately wanting to. Eventually, Sophie's sobs quieted. She pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I'm hungry, Mama. My stomach hurts. Rebecca's own stomach clenched at the reminder. When had Sophie last eaten? Yesterday's school lunch, probably. She stood, taking Sophie's hand. Let's see what food Mr. Caruso's people left for us. The refrigerator was fully stocked. Fresh fruit, vegetables, milk, juice, deli meat, cheese. The freezer held chicken breasts, ground beef, and 3 different kinds of ice cream. The pantry had pasta, rice, canned goods, snacks, and an entire shelf of cereal boxes. More food than Rebecca had seen in one place in months. David had controlled their grocery money, doling it out in small amounts, keeping them always on the edge of hunger as another form of control. Rebecca made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, watching Sophie eat with the focused intensity of a child who'd learned that meals weren't guaranteed. She forced herself to eat too, though her stomach protested. She'd gone 2 days without food, and her body needed time to adjust. After dinner, Rebecca ran a bath for Sophie, helping her wash away the stress and fear of the day. She found pajamas in the bag she'd packed months ago, a little small now, but clean and familiar. Sophie's eyelids were drooping by the time Rebecca tucked her into the smaller bedroom's double bed. Will Mr. Dante come back? Sophie asked, fighting sleep. I don't know, baby. Maybe. I hope he does, Sophie murmured. He has kind eyes, like he understands about being scared. Rebecca stroked her daughter's hair until she fell asleep, then stood watch for another 10 minutes, making sure Sophie's breathing stayed deep and even. Only then did she allow herself to move to the living room, where she collapsed onto the couch and finally let herself break down. The sobs came from somewhere deep inside, years of pain and fear and helplessness pouring out in waves that left her gasping. She cried for the woman she'd been before David, full of dreams and confidence. She cried for the years stolen from her, for the mother she should have been to Sophie. She cried for all the times she'd begged for help and been ignored or dismissed or blamed for her own abuse. And underneath all of it, she cried with relief. They were out. They were safe. Someone had actually listened to Sophie's desperate whisper and done something about it. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Rebecca must have fallen asleep on the couch because she woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee. She jerked upright, disoriented and panicked, before remembering where she was. The Montclair apartment, Safety. Freedom. Sophie was still asleep in her room. Rebecca could see her through the open doorway, curled around her rabbit, peaceful in a way she rarely was at home. At David's house, Rebecca corrected herself. Not home. Never home again. Rebecca followed the coffee smell to the kitchen, where she found a note propped against the coffee maker. Thought you might need this. Fresh grounds in the canister. D. C. Such a small gesture. Such a thoughtful one. Rebecca made herself a cup, holding it in both hands and savoring the warmth, the rich smell, the simple luxury of coffee that wasn't instant crystals dissolved in lukewarm tap water. Her phone buzzed. She'd left it in her purse yesterday, too overwhelmed to check it. Now she saw dozens of missed calls and texts from David. The messages started apologetic. "I'm sorry. I lost my temper. Please come home," and quickly escalated to threatening. "You're making a huge mistake. I know where you are. I'm calling the police right now. You've kidnapped my daughter." Rebecca's hands shook as she read them, the familiar fear trying to claw its way back. But then she noticed the timestamps. The last message had been sent at 11:47 p.m. last night. Nothing since. David's silence was almost more frightening than his threats. A knock at the door made her jump, coffee sloshing over the rim of her cup. She approached cautiously, looking through the peephole to see Dante Caruso standing in the hallway, holding a bag from a local bakery. Rebecca hesitated. She was still in yesterday's clothes, hadn't showered, probably looked like hell. But he'd already seen her at her worst, hadn't he? Locked in a basement, bruised and broken. What did morning after appearance matter? She opened the door. "Good morning," Dante said, his voice carefully neutral. "I brought breakfast, fresh bagels and pastries. I wasn't sure what you and Sophie would like, so I got a variety." "You didn't have to do that," Rebecca said, but she stepped aside to let him in. The smell of fresh baked goods made her stomach growl audibly. Dante's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. "When's the last time you had a real breakfast? Not counting the grilled cheese I'm guessing you made for Sophie last night. How did you—" Rebecca started, then stopped. Of course he knew. He probably had someone reporting on them, making sure they were settling in. The thought should have bothered her more than it did. Security detail saw lights in the kitchen around 7 p.m. Dante explained, reading her expression. "They're here to protect you, Rebecca, not to spy. But yes, they're thorough." He moved to the kitchen, unpacking the bag with efficient movements. Bagels, cream cheese, lox, fresh fruit, croissants, Danish pastries. Another overwhelming amount of food. "Sophie's still asleep," Rebecca said, hovering in the doorway. She didn't know how to act around this man. He'd saved them, but she didn't know him. Didn't know his motives or his expectations or what kind of debt she'd incurred by accepting his help. "That's okay. This will keep." Dante turned to face her, his expression serious. "How are you feeling, really?" Rebecca laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. "I don't know. Grateful, terrified, confused. Waiting for the other shoe to drop." "What shoe?" "The one where you tell me what you actually want in exchange for all this." Rebecca gestured around the apartment. "Nobody does this out of kindness. Nobody helps without expecting something in return. So just tell me what it is. What do I owe you?" Dante was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "You owe me nothing. But I understand why you don't believe that. David Morrison spent years teaching you that everything comes with a price, that kindness is a trap, that accepting help means surrendering control. Doesn't it?" Rebecca challenged. "Not always. Sometimes help is just help." He pulled out a business card and set it on the kitchen counter. "This is my lawyer, Maria Castellano. She's expecting your call. She'll handle your divorce proceedings, the custody paperwork, and the property transfer. All of it. Her fees are already paid." Rebecca stared at the card. "Why?" "Because David Morrison owes me $50,000 that he's never going to repay. Because he destroyed his business, defaulted on his loans, and committed multiple counts of fraud in the process. Because he's going to prison, and before he does, I want to make sure you and Sophie are protected from him legally and financially. Prison? Rebecca's voice came out as a whisper. My investigator found enough evidence to bury him. Identity theft, check fraud, wire fraud. The U.S. Attorney's Office is very interested in having a conversation with Mr. Morrison. Dante's expression hardened. He's not just a bad husband, Rebecca. He's a career criminal who's been running cons for years. The loan from me was just his most recent scam. Rebecca sank into one of the kitchen chairs, her legs suddenly unable to support her. I didn't know. I knew he was bad with money, but I thought, you thought it was incompetence, not criminality. Most people would. Dante sat across from her, maintaining distance but present. He's facing 15 to 20 years. By the time he gets out, Sophie will be grown. You'll have rebuilt your life. He'll be nothing but a bad memory. It was too much. Too good. Rebecca waited for the catch, for the moment Dante would reveal what he really wanted. Instead, he stood and moved back to the counter, plating bagels and fruit with surprising domesticity for a man who looked like he could break someone in half. Eat something, he said, setting a plate in front of her. You need your strength. Maria will call you this afternoon to discuss next steps. In the meantime, there's money in the account I set up for you. Enough to cover immediate expenses while we sort out the legal issues. An account? Rebecca repeated faintly. Temporary. Until you have access to your own funds again. The pin is Sophie's birthday. He pulled out another card. This one, a debit card with Rebecca's name on it. Use it for whatever you need. Clothes, food, supplies for Sophie, anything. Rebecca took the card, feeling like she was in a dream. 24 hours ago, she'd been locked in a basement. Now she was sitting in a beautiful apartment, eating fresh bagels, holding a debit card that apparently had enough money to cover immediate expenses. It was surreal. I don't understand you, she said quietly. You show up to collect a debt, and instead you do all this. Why? What are you, really? Dante was quiet for a moment, and something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or memory. I'm someone who has a lot of power and is trying to figure out how to use it for something good. I'm someone who heard your daughter ask for help and couldn't walk away. And I'm someone who knows what it's like to feel powerless. Before Rebecca could respond, Sophie appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She saw Dante, and her face lit up with a smile that made Rebecca's chest ache. Mr. Dante, Sophie exclaimed. You came back! I brought breakfast, Dante said, and his voice was gentler than Rebecca had heard it. Are you hungry, Piccolina? Sophie nodded vigorously and climbed into the chair next to her mother. Dante fixed her a plate, remembering to cut the bagel into smaller pieces, noticing the way she eyed the chocolate croissant with longing and adding it to her plate without being asked. He paid attention, Rebecca realized. Really paid attention in a way David never had. They ate breakfast together, an odd little trio, and Rebecca found herself relaxing despite her better judgment. Dante told Sophie about the park across the street, about the library 2 blocks away, about the ice cream shop that made their own waffle cones. He spoke directly to Sophie, not over her head or around her, treating her like a person whose opinions mattered. Sophie blossomed under the attention, chattering about school and her favorite books and how she wanted to learn to draw better. Dante listened with what appeared to be genuine interest, asking questions and offering suggestions. Rebecca watched them interact and felt something warm and terrifying unfold in her chest. This was dangerous. This feeling of safety, of being cared for, of maybe not being alone anymore. She'd learned not to trust these feelings. They were the trap that had led her to David in the first place. He'd been charming too, attentive too, had made her feel special and protected right up until the first time he'd hit her. But Dante wasn't David. Everything in her recognized that truth, even as her scarred heart tried to reject it. After breakfast, Dante stood to leave. Sophie looked disappointed, and Rebecca felt an echo of that disappointment that she tried to suppress. I have business to attend to, Dante said, but I'll check in tomorrow. Make sure you're settling in okay. He looked at Rebecca. Call Maria today. The sooner we start the legal process, the sooner you'll be truly free. Thank you, Rebecca said, the words inadequate for everything he'd done. I know I keep saying it, but… You don't have to keep thanking me, Dante interrupted gently. Just focus on healing. You and Sophie both. That's all I ask. After he left, Sophie turned to her mother with serious eyes. He's a good man, isn't he, Mama? I think so, Rebecca admitted. But we need to be careful, okay? We don't know him very well yet. I know him, Sophie said with the certainty of childhood. He has the same eyes as you. Sad but trying to be brave. I think maybe he needs someone to help him too. Rebecca pulled her daughter close, marveling at her perception. Sophie was right. There had been something in Dante's eyes, a loneliness that resonated with Rebecca's own. They were both survivors of different kinds of trauma, both trying to figure out how to build something good from the wreckage. The days developed a rhythm. Rebecca called Maria Castellano, who turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense attitude and a genuine warmth beneath her professional exterior. Maria explained the legal process, the evidence against David, the timeline for divorce and custody proceedings. David's lawyer is already trying to negotiate, Maria said during their first meeting in her downtown office. He knows his client is facing serious criminal charges. We have all the leverage here. Full custody to you, the house transferred to your name, and David relinquishes all parental rights. In exchange, you don't pursue a civil suit for the abuse. I don't want his money, Rebecca said. I just want him gone. Out of our lives completely. That's what will get you, Maria promised. Dante said to give you whatever you needed. And what you need is a clean break and legal protection. Rebecca met with social workers who documented her injuries, both old and new. She gave statements to police about the basement, the locks on bedroom doors, the systematic isolation and abuse. It was excruciating, reliving every moment, but also strangely cathartic. For years, she'd been silenced. Now people were listening, really listening, and believing her. Dante visited every few days, always with some excuse. He needed to check on a maintenance issue in the apartment. He was in the neighborhood for business. He'd found a book he thought Sophie would like. The excuses were thin, but Rebecca found herself looking forward to his visits. He never stayed long, never pushed boundaries, but his presence was becoming familiar, comfortable. Sophie adored him, would run to the door whenever she heard his knock. He brought her art supplies and children's books in Italian, teaching her simple phrases that made her giggle. He fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom and adjusted the cabinet door that stuck in the kitchen. Domestic tasks that felt surreal coming from a man who commanded such obvious power. One evening, 2 weeks after they'd moved in, Rebecca found herself cooking dinner while Dante sat at the kitchen counter, ostensibly reviewing some paperwork, but mostly watching Sophie color at the dining room table. You don't have to keep checking on us, Rebecca said, stirring pasta sauce. We're safe here. Your security team is thorough. You've done more than enough. I know I don't have to, Dante replied. I want to. Unless, he paused. Unless I'm making you uncomfortable. If you'd rather I stayed away. No, Rebecca said quickly, surprising herself. No, I don't want to be a burden. Or an obligation. Dante set down his papers and looked at her directly. Rebecca, you're not a burden. Neither is Sophie. I come here because I want to see how you're doing. Because Sophie makes me laugh. Because you're… He stopped, seeming to search for words. You're rebuilding something. Beautiful from something terrible. That's worth witnessing. Rebecca felt heat rise in her cheeks. She turned back to the stove, using the sauce as an excuse to avoid his gaze. I'm not beautiful. I'm a mess. I have nightmares every night. I panic when I hear loud noises. I'm terrified every time the phone rings that it's going to be David, even though I know he can't reach me. I'm broken, Dante. You survived. Dante corrected quietly. There's nothing broken about that. You protected your daughter through hell. You kept your strength and your intelligence and your capacity for hope, even when everything was designed to destroy those things. That's not broken, Rebecca. That's extraordinary. She turned to look at him, seeing the sincerity in his dark eyes. Why do you care? Really? I know you said it's about Sophie asking for help, but it's more than that, isn't it? Dante was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion he rarely showed. My mother was killed when I was 12, murdered by my father's enemies who wanted to hurt him through the people he loved. He spent the rest of his life building systems to protect families, to make sure no one else lost what he lost. He taught me that power without protection is just tyranny. That strength should be used to shelter, not to control. He looked at Sophie, still coloring peacefully. When I heard Sophie say those words, he locks her in the basement, I heard every woman who'd ever asked for help and been ignored. I heard my mother, who died because my father couldn't protect her. I heard decades of failure and missed chances and power used for everything except what it should be used for. He met Rebecca's eyes. So yes, it's personal. It's about proving that power can be used to help, that I can be better than the men who came before me. Rebecca moved closer, standing on the opposite side of the counter. Your mother would be proud of who you've become. I hope so, Dante said quietly. Most days I'm not sure. I've done things, Rebecca. Made choices that probably disqualify me from being anyone's hero. But with you and Sophie, I get to be someone better. Even if it's just for a little while. It doesn't have to be just for a little while, Rebecca said, the words escaping before she could stop them. I mean, if you wanted to keep visiting, Sophie would like that. I would like that. Dante's expression softened. I'd like that too. They were interrupted by Sophie announcing that she'd finished her picture. It was a drawing of 3 people, a woman with dark hair, a small girl, and a tall man with kind eyes standing in front of a building with flowers all around. That's us, Sophie explained, showing it to Dante. At our new home. See? You're smiling in the picture. You should smile more in real life. You look nice when you smile. Dante did smile then, genuine and warm. You're right, Piccolina. I should smile more, especially when I'm here with you and your mama. Rebecca served dinner, and they ate together like a family. A strange, unconventional family built from trauma and rescue, and the tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, good things could grow from terrible beginnings. 3 weeks after their rescue, Maria called with news. David signed everything. Full custody to you. The house is being transferred, and he's agreed to leave the state within 72 hours. The federal charges are proceeding, but that's out of our hands now. As far as your divorce and custody are concerned, it's done. You're free. Free. The word echoed in Rebecca's mind like a bell. She was free. Sophie was safe. David was gone and would never be able to hurt them again. She should have felt relief, joy. Instead, she felt numb, like her emotions had been so thoroughly suppressed that they didn't know how to function anymore. That evening, when Dante arrived for his now routine visit, Rebecca answered the door and simply stood there, looking at him. What's wrong? He asked immediately, concern sharpening his features. Nothing's wrong, Rebecca said. Everything's right. That's the problem. I don't know how to process this. I spent so long just surviving that I forgot how to actually live. Dante stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Then we'll figure it out together. You don't have to know how to do this alone. Why? Rebecca asked, the question that had been building for weeks finally breaking free. Why do you keep coming back? Why do you care so much? Is it guilt? Obligation? Some kind of savior complex? It's none of those things, Dante said quietly. He stopped, seeming to struggle with something. It's that when I'm here, I feel like the man I always wanted to be. When Sophie shows me her drawings, when you cook dinner, when we sit together and talk about nothing important, I'm not Dante Caruso, the man people fear. I'm just Dante, someone's friend. Maybe someone's... He stopped again. Someone's what? Rebecca pressed, her heart hammering. Someone who cares about you, Dante finished. More than I probably should. More than is smart given my world and your recovery and all the reasons this is complicated. But I can't seem to stop myself from wanting to be here. To see you smile. To watch Sophie grow up without fear. To be part of something good for once in my life. Rebecca's breath caught. She'd known, on some level, that this was developing into something beyond gratitude and obligation. But hearing him say it out loud made it real. Made it terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm scared to trust this, to trust you. To trust my own judgment after getting it so catastrophically wrong with David. I know, Dante said. And I'm not asking you to trust me. Not yet. I'm just asking for time. Time to prove that not every man will hurt you. Time to let Sophie see what a healthy relationship looks like. Time for all of us to figure out what this is and what it could be. And if I can't? Rebecca asked. If I'm too damaged, too broken, too scared, then I'll still be here, Dante said simply. As a friend. As someone who wants to see you and Sophie thrive. Whatever you can offer, whatever you're comfortable with, that's enough. Rebecca looked at this man who'd saved them, who'd given them everything and asked for nothing, who'd shown them kindness without control. She thought about Sophie's drawing, the three of them smiling together. She thought about the quiet evenings they'd shared, the way Dante made her feel safe without making her feel weak. Okay, she said quietly. Time. We can try that. Dante's smile was like sunrise. That's all I'm asking for. From the living room, Sophie called out, Is Mr. Dante staying for dinner? I drew him another picture. Yes, Rebecca called back, still looking at Dante. Mr. Dante is staying for dinner. As they moved toward the kitchen, toward Sophie's excited chatter, and the warmth of this makeshift family, Rebecca felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not just safety, but possibility. The sense that maybe, just maybe, her story didn't have to be defined by what had been done to her. Maybe she could write a new chapter. One with kindness and patience, and a man with sad eyes who was trying to be better. One where the monster was finally gone and the protection was real. The call came at midnight, 3 months after Rebecca and Sophie had moved into the Montclair apartment. Rebecca woke to her phone vibrating on the nightstand, Dante's name glowing on the screen. Her heart immediately jumped to her throat. He never called this late unless something was wrong. Dante, she answered, her voice rough with sleep and instant worry. Rebecca. His voice was tight, controlled in a way that meant he was barely holding himself together. David escaped from the federal detention center tonight. They don't know how, but he's gone. I'm sending Marco to your building right now. Don't open the door for anyone except him. Rebecca was already out of bed, her hands shaking as she grabbed clothes from the dresser. How did he escape? I thought. Someone helped him from the inside. We're working on finding out who. Dante's voice was cold fury, barely contained. But right now, all that matters is keeping you and Sophie safe. Marco will take you to a secure location. I'll meet you there. Where are you? Handling this, which meant something violent and final. Rebecca understood. I'll be there soon. Trust Marco. He'll protect you both with his life. The line went dead. Rebecca moved quickly to Sophie's room, gently shaking her daughter awake. Baby, we need to go on an adventure. Remember what Mr. Dante taught you about the emergency bag? Sophie's eyes opened, immediately alert. 3 months of safety had helped, but the survival instincts remained. Is the bad man coming? Mr. Dante is making sure he can't hurt us, Rebecca said, helping Sophie into warm clothes. But we're going somewhere extra safe, just in case. They were packed and waiting by the door when Marco arrived, his knock a specific pattern Dante had taught them. Rebecca checked the peephole anyway, seeing Marco's familiar face, grim but reassuring. Mrs. Morrison, he said as she opened the door. We need to move quickly. The car is waiting downstairs. The drive was silent. Sophie pressed against Rebecca's side, clutching her rabbit. Marco took them to a building Rebecca didn't recognize, a nondescript structure in an industrial area. But inside, it transformed into something else entirely. Reinforced walls, security cameras, and armed men who nodded respectfully as Marco led them to a top-floor apartment. "Mr. Caruso will be here within the hour," Marco said. "Everything you need is here. I'll be right outside if you need anything." The apartment was smaller than their Montclair place, but just as secure. Rebecca got Sophie settled on the couch with a blanket, then stood at the window, staring out at the city lights and trying not to let panic consume her. David was out. David was free. David, who'd sworn he'd make her disappear if she ever left him. David, who had nothing left to lose and every reason to want revenge. The door opened, and Dante strode in. His suit jacket gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his hands showing the faint marks of recent violence. He went straight to Rebecca, his hands cupping her face as he searched her eyes. "Are you all right?" he demanded. "Did anyone approach you? Has there been any contact?" "We're fine," Rebecca said, her hands coming up to grip his wrists, anchoring herself to his solid presence. "Dante, what happened?" David had help from a guard he'd been paying off. They found the guard's body an hour ago. Dante's jaw clenched. David killed him to cover his tracks. "He's desperate and dangerous, and he's coming for you. I know it." "How do you know?" "Because I would," Dante said simply. "If I were him, if I'd lost everything and had nothing but rage left, I'd go after the person I blamed for my downfall. He blames you, Rebecca. For leaving, for talking, for destroying the life he built on controlling you." Rebecca felt ice flood her veins. "What do we do?" "I end this," Dante said, his voice dropping to that dangerous register she rarely heard. "Permanently. Tonight. You're going to kill him. It wasn't a question." "Yes. No hesitation, no apology. He's a threat to you and Sophie. As long as he's alive, you'll never be truly safe. I won't let him take away what we've built. What we're building." Rebecca should have been horrified, should have protested, should have insisted on letting the police handle it. But she'd tried the legal system. She'd tried restraining orders and police reports in all the proper channels. They'd failed her. And now David was free, hunting them, willing to kill anyone who got in his way. "Be careful," she whispered instead. "Please, Sophie needs you. I need—" Dante's expression softened. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I'll come back to you, both of you. That's a promise." He kissed her forehead, then went to where Sophie had been watching them with wide, knowing eyes. He knelt beside the couch, his large hand gentle on her small shoulder. "Piccolina, I need to go take care of something important. Marco will stay with you and your mama. You'll be safe here." "Are you going to stop the bad man?" Sophie asked. "Like really stop him? Forever?" "Yes," Dante said honestly. "Is that okay?" Sophie nodded solemnly. "Mama says sometimes bad people don't stop being bad until someone makes them. And you're strong enough to make him stop, aren't you?" "I am," Dante confirmed. "And when I come back, we're going to celebrate. Maybe ice cream for breakfast?" Sophie managed a small smile. "With chocolate syrup? With whatever you want." He kissed her forehead, then stood and looked at Rebecca one more time. "Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except Marco or me." After he left, Rebecca did exactly that, engaging every lock and then sinking down beside Sophie on the couch. They sat together in the quiet, waiting, Sophie eventually dozing against her mother's shoulder while Rebecca stared at the door and tried not to imagine all the ways this night could go wrong. Dante found David Morrison in a motel on the outskirts of Newark, holed up in a room that smelled of cheap whiskey and desperation. His men had tracked Morrison through a combination of surveillance footage, informants, and the kind of street intelligence that money and fear could buy. Dante didn't knock. He had Marco kick in the door, and they flooded the room with 3 armed men who had David on the ground and zip-tied before he could reach the gun on the nightstand. "Hello, David," Dante said, closing the door behind them. "We need to talk." Morrison's face was a mask of rage and fear. He'd lost weight in detention, his face gaunt, his eyes wild. "You're going to kill me," he spat. "Might as well get it over with." "Eventually," Dante agreed. "But first, I want to make sure you understand why. I want you to know exactly what you threw away and why you'll never get it back." He pulled over a chair and sat down, casual despite the violence humming in the air. "Rebecca and Sophie are safe. They're happy. They're thriving without you. Every day, Sophie gets brighter. Every day, Rebecca heals a little more from what you did to her. They're building a life where fear doesn't exist, where locked doors and basements are just architectural features, not torture chambers." "She's mine," Morrison snarled. "My wife, my daughter. You had no right." "They were never yours," Dante interrupted, his voice sharp as a blade. "You don't own people, Morrison. You never did. They were human beings you happened to live with until they escaped. And now they're free, and they're mine to protect. Which brings us to the problem." He leaned forward, his expression hardening. "As long as you're alive, they're not completely safe. As long as you can pick a lock or bribe a guard or find a weapon, there's a chance you'll hurt them again. I can't allow that chance to exist. So you're just going to murder me?" Morrison's laugh was bitter. "That makes you better than me?" "No," Dante said simply. "It makes me more effective. I don't pretend to be a good man, Morrison. I am exactly what I appear to be, someone willing to do violence to protect what matters. The difference between us is that I use my power to shelter people. You used yours to destroy them." He stood, nodding to Marco. "Make it look like suicide. Guilt over his crimes. Couldn't handle the pressure. Leave a note confessing to everything. The abuse, the fraud, the guard's murder. Give Rebecca the closure she needs." "Wait," Morrison said, panic finally breaking through his bravado. "Wait, please. I'll leave. I'll go to another country. You'll never see me again. Just don't—" "You had your chance to walk away," Dante said coldly. "You chose to escape, to come after them, to kill a man who was just doing his job. You made yourself into a problem that only has one solution." He walked to the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I hope hell is exactly what you deserve." 20 minutes later, David Morrison was found dead in his motel room, an apparent suicide. The note confessed to years of abuse, to the crimes that had landed him in federal detention, to killing the guard during his escape. It was thorough, damning, and exactly what the authorities needed to close their cases. Dante returned to the safe house as dawn broke over the city, exhausted but satisfied. The threat was ended. Rebecca and Sophie were truly free now. No more fear, no more running, no more monster lurking in the shadows. Rebecca was awake, sitting by the window with a cold cup of coffee. She looked up as he entered, searching his face, and found her answer in his expression. "It's done," Dante said quietly. "He can't hurt you anymore." Rebecca stood slowly, walking to him, and then she was in his arms, crying against his chest while he held her. Not tears of grief for the man David had been, but tears of release. Years of terror finally ending, the weight of constant fear finally lifting. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for giving us our lives back." Sophie appeared in the doorway, sleepy and rumpled. "Is it over? Can we go home now?" "Yes, Piccolina," Dante said, smiling at her. "We can go home, and we're going to celebrate with ice cream for breakfast, just like I promised." 6 months later, Rebecca stood in the kitchen of their Montclair apartment, their permanent home now, the deed transferred to her name, preparing dinner while Sophie did homework at the table. The radio played softly, and through the window, she could see the first hints of spring arriving in the park across the street. The doorbell rang, and Sophie jumped up. Immediately. "That's Dante," Rebecca smiled, wiping her hands on a dish towel. The frequency of his visits had increased until they'd stopped pretending they were just check-ins. Now he came for dinner most nights, helped Sophie with her homework, fixed things around the apartment, and stayed late talking with Rebecca about everything and nothing. They hadn't labeled what this was yet, hadn't rushed into anything physical beyond chaste kisses goodnight. But Rebecca felt it growing between them, something real and solid and completely different from what she'd had with David. Dante brought groceries and flowers, kissing Rebecca's cheek before kneeling to accept Sophie's enthusiastic hug. "How was school, Piccolina?" "I got an A on my book report," Sophie announced proudly. "And I made a friend. Her name is Isabella, and she wants to come over for a playdate." "That's wonderful," Dante said, genuine pleasure in his voice. He looked at Rebecca. "Is that okay with you?" "More than okay," Rebecca said. "Sophie, having normal childhood friendships is exactly what I wanted for her." Over dinner, they talked and laughed, the three of them falling into rhythms that felt like family. After Sophie went to bed, Dante helped Rebecca clean up, their movements synchronized from weeks of practice. "I have something to ask you," Dante said as they finished. "And I need you to think about it carefully before answering." Rebecca's heart jumped. "Okay, I want this to be permanent," Dante said, taking her hands. "Not just the visits, not just the friendship. I want to be part of your lives officially. I want to adopt Sophie if you'll let me. I want to marry you when you're ready. I want us to be a family, really and truly." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "Dante, I know it's fast," he continued. "I know you need more time to heal. I'm not asking you to say yes right now. I'm just asking you to think about it. To consider that maybe we could build something beautiful from what started as tragedy." Rebecca thought about the past months, about watching Dante with Sophie, patient and kind and everything a father should be, about the safety she felt with him, the kind that didn't come with control or conditions, about the possibility of love that protected instead of destroyed. "I don't need time to think about it," she said quietly. "Yes, to all of it. When I'm ready, when Sophie's ready, yes." Dante's smile was brilliant. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was precious, like she was cherished. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice." "You already have," Rebecca whispered. They stood together in the quiet kitchen, two broken people who'd found each other at exactly the right moment. Sophie's desperate whisper through a door had led to this, to healing, to family, to the understanding that sometimes the darkest moments could lead to the brightest futures. The monster was gone. The basement door would never lock again, and in its place was something Rebecca had stopped believing existed. A love built on respect, protection offered without strings, and a future where she and Sophie could finally breathe. From down the hall, Sophie's sleepy voice called out, "Are you guys done being mushy? Because I can hear you, and it's gross but also nice." They both laughed, the sound carrying through the apartment that had transformed from shelter to home. "Go back to sleep, Piccolina," Dante called back. "Only if you promise to still be here for breakfast." Dante looked at Rebecca, his eyes full of promise and hope. "I'll always be here for breakfast. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.